Hi, I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And this is Rediscover, a conversation where we travel through everything that makes up the essence of who we are and how to live authentically and imaginatively.
Here, we invite you to join us as we explore and discuss a little bit of, well, everything.
From Disney to cultivating your most authentic life to deepening your relationships and talking about the real stuff.
We hope you'll find this a space that speaks to you, encourages you, and brings a little bit of magic into your day.
Hi there, I'm Jess.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen.
And welcome back to this week's episode of Rediscover.
We are approaching the middle of February, which if you've been around since last week, you know that this month is dedicated to all things love and relationships. We are fast approaching the sometimes dreaded, sometimes anticipated holiday that is Valentine's Day. And this week's episode is dedicated to the 5 love languages.
So the 5 love languages is a concept written by
Dr. Gary Chapman
in his book called The 5 Love Languages, and it is kind of a relationship go-to for people when they're looking for a strategy to strengthen their relationships. It breaks down how people give and receive love into 5 different categories, which we are going to dive deeply into today so you guys can get a deeper understanding of what they are and how to implement them into your own relationships.
I learned about them probably about 5 or 6 years ago now. My mind was totally blown, and I feel like it shifted my whole perspective on my approach to partnership and learning how to love people better. And while we are going to be talking about these in the context of a romantic relationship, just know that they can be applied to your other relationships as well, your familial relationships or your friendships.
So the love language quiz is kind of similar to like a Myers-Briggs or an Enneagram or your zodiac sign, things like that. It's more of just a guideline so you can use it as a tool to, again, strengthen and deepen your relationships.
When you take the test, it's kind of going to give you an idea of the ways that you best receive love, and it'll give you a percentage for each of the 5 to give you kind of your lowest and highest. And again, like Jess said, this is not something that's meant to put you in a box or anything like that. It's just meant to be a tool, kind of like a springing off point, where if you see that one of your love languages is like way higher than the rest, then maybe you might lean into that and start noticing where in your life it shows up for you, or maybe where you're lacking that a little bit.
And you can tell your partner when you're expressing what you need from them that you need more of this or that versus certain things that you are receiving, because maybe you just need a little boost in a different area than what you're getting at that current time.
Exactly. We will link the test that we have used in the show notes. It's actually going to be found at 5lovelanguages.com, and that's a 5 like the number 5, not the word spelled out. And that's the one that we took, and we actually took it right before we recorded this episode just to make sure we had like the most up-to-date results. And I actually was surprised by mine because I hadn't taken it in several years, and mine has changed, so that was interesting.
So stay tuned till the end of the episode and we'll share with you what ours are. And without further ado, shall we get started?
Yes, we're going to start by giving you an overview of what the 5 love languages are and maybe some examples of each.
The first love language we're going to dive into is physical touch. This one's widely misconceived because people automatically go to sex, which is part of it for sure. But physical touch also is connected to just any sort of touch you have with your partner. We're going to talk in the context of romantic relationships here. So this could include holding hands, touching your partner on the shoulder or the back when you're passing by.
Yeah, I think it's all about communication on this one. If you have anxiety, you're like, hey, it makes me feel calm and secure when you just put your arm around me when I'm kind of like having an anxious moment. Or I really like when we're out somewhere and you just take my hand and hold my hand. Things like that. They can be very simple, like touch on the shoulder or a kiss on the forehead. Little things that just kind of remind the other person, like, I'm here, I see you, and I care about you.
Hugs are a really, really big one.
Love hugs.
We love hugs. Maybe giving your partner a back massage or a hand massage or a foot massage.
So moving along to the second love language. Again, we're speaking in the context of committed romantic relationships for this episode. We're not really talking casual like first dates. We're not talking friendships or familial relationships. We're talking about someone that you like have committed your heart to. They are, after all, called love languages, not like languages. We want to make the differentiation there, especially because we're going to get into, you know, some pretty emotional things, and love and sex and all of that stuff is very emotionally bound. So the second love language is words of affirmation. And this can include both spoken or written words. So an example of a written word would be, you know, leaving your partner a note, or maybe like writing a text in the middle of the day, like, hey, I hope your day's going really well, thinking about you. Just kind of like an anecdote or something to encourage them and get them through the day, or just a reminder of their meaning and worth to you. So it can be spoken or written or emailed or whatever. And I think the important thing to note here is that words of affirmation, when used intentionally, should be really specific to your partner.
Yeah, I think one of the best approaches to words of affirmation are almost getting into the details, because then it really shows that you know the other person's heart. And if they really receive words of affirmation well, getting into those really specific mannerisms about them, or quirks, or just little things that they do, or the ways that they show up in the world, that can really bring light to something that maybe they didn't even realize about themselves. I think one of the best ways to express words of affirmation is handwritten letters. Then not only do you get the handwriting of the person, but you get to keep this tangible form of love with you forever, if you're the type of person who saves letters like I do. I think the only thing with words of affirmation that you do need to be careful of is to not use that as a source of full validation for yourself. I know I used to do that when I was younger. I would almost rely on that to fill me up. Just make sure that, like, I know these things about myself and I do feel really like full on my own, but these words of affirmation just make me feel even more full and more loved from my partner. And I'm not using them to fully fuel myself. We're going to move on to receiving gifts. We were talking about this one earlier, and there is, you know, the misconception that maybe just getting a bunch of gifts will make my partner feel fulfilled. Okay, everybody likes receiving gifts or getting presents, but the thing that really drives this one home is when you are giving your partner a gift that made you think of them, that really resonates with them. I think receiving gifts doesn't have to do with the materialistic side. It's more about the thoughtfulness side and the connection you feel when somebody was out there thinking about you and brought this home for you.
There's like a couple of things to keep in mind when you're getting a gift for your partner, like that thing that they want but they might not buy for themselves because they're trying to save money, or maybe they just can't really justify spending money on something they don't need right now. And then you're going, okay, well, I have a little extra money in my account and they work really hard, so I'm gonna get them this as a surprise. That's so gratifying, and it's also like motivating, because then, you know, you can flip the script, and when you have a little extra money and maybe your partner is trying to save up, you can return the favor and find a gift that's just as meaningful for them.
Right.
Something that shows you that not only are they paying attention, but that they really see you, hear you, know you, and celebrate who you are and where you come from. So that's really beautiful.
When we were in Vero Beach, we saw this Alex and Ani bracelet with Jasmine on it, who is, of course, my favorite Disney princess. So I was packing up the room, and Steven actually went down and bought it for me and went down to the parking garage and put it on my front seat of the car.
Aww.
So when we went down to the car to leave the resort, it was sitting there waiting for me. It was so thoughtful to me, and he went the extra step and surprised me with it. So I feel like that just made me completely light up, and not because of the bracelet, which I do love and cherish, but the like intention and the thought behind it was so sweet. And having things be a surprise too when you are giving gifts in that little way where your partner doesn't really expect it, that just adds an extra level of love on top of it.
Because not only did he think about the gift and the fact that you would love the gift, but he also thought about how you would receive the gift.
Yeah.
Like, how can I make this an experience for her? Because he knows you to be a very experiential person.
Right.
And that's so cool. The next love language is acts of service. So this one, again, pretty straightforward, but basically how you devote your time or even sacrifice your time to either perform a task that your partner is just, you maybe swamped with work and doesn't have time to do, or just something you can do to make your partner's day a little easier or their week a little less stressful. Or maybe they're just really going through it right now. Maybe they've got stuff going on with their family, or their job is really just taking its toll, and you just want to do something to lessen their load. I think that's really, really telling of how much you care, how much you're paying attention, and how much you want your partner to just feel at ease, especially when time scarcity is involved. Like, even if you don't have a lot of free time, the fact that you're willing and ready and happy to give what little time you have to the person you love says so much to that person.
Some examples of acts of service could be doing the dishes that night after your partner just cooked, or being there to run to the grocery store and grab the groceries that your partner needs because they have to work on a project that they are running out of time for, or maybe doing some sort of yard work. People feel really heard and seen and taken care of when they have somebody else doing things for them. Not an overextent of doing things, but doing things, again, out of thoughtfulness. Acts of service is a literal physical expression of doing something for the other person.
Recently, my mom and stepdad have been kind of renovating our family's house, and they were redoing like the half bathroom in the downstairs. And, you know, it was kind of getting there. It wasn't quite done yet, but on Christmas Eve, my mom went upstairs, and I was kind of over just hanging out at the house, and my mom went upstairs to wrap everyone's presents, and she was like upstairs for a long time, and I think I was like making Christmas cookies or something, and my stepdad was like, I'm gonna try and hurry up and get the door on. They had to take the door off of the bathroom, so he's like trying to get it done, and he wanted to surprise her. He wanted it to be like exactly how she envisioned it, so he spent Christmas Eve, a day that you're supposed to be relaxing, like working hard to get that done for her. So I thought that was really sweet and a great way. He is like so good at acts of service. He is such an example of that. So I learned a lot from him about that.
Number 5 is quality time, which again is very self-explanatory, but quality time is really about spending intentional time with your partner. This could be anything from going for a walk on the beach together. You could be taking a class together, doing a hobby, a weekend stay at a hotel, and just spend time with the two of you. Or this could also just be sitting on the couch, being in the presence of one another, doing quote unquote nothing. Now with that one, you do have to be careful, because if you are spending a lot of your time doing that, where you're more zoned in on your phones or watching movies, sometimes the actual quality piece tends to diminish. Life can go really fast, and all of a sudden it's been a week and you've barely spent time with your partner. So quality time, if that is one of your top love languages, it's really important to make sure you have the time set aside to connect with your partner.
To quote Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Hobbies are really a fun way to spend quality time together, and I think finding a hobby you both enjoy is great, but also engaging in your partner's hobbies, even if it's not at the top of your list. It's so meaningful. Really, time is our most precious resource. When you set aside your valuable time to do something that you know your partner loves to do, even though they know it's not at the top of your list, it really does show how much you care. And I think as long as that's being reciprocated, that's a really great way to show love. That is a general overview of the 5 love languages, some examples, and just some kind of practical ways to exercise them. And we, like I said, right before filming this episode, we each retook the test. Jess, what was your highest and lowest for how you receive love?
Yes. So I basically love all of the love languages, but my number 1, as of now, it does fluctuate and change. My number 1 is words of affirmation. I have always been someone who gets completely lit up by any sort of kind words. It started in school when we did this activity where we had to write like one nice thing about each of our classmates. And then when you got the one back about yourself, my whole soul lit up. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best feeling ever. Yeah. So in a relationship, I just thrive off of any sort of cards or little notes left around, or letters or text messages too. Right under that are quality time and physical touch.
What's your lowest one?
My lowest one is acts of service, which I still do very much appreciate, but the other four definitely reign supreme. I can feel quite a difference.
Yeah. And do you think that the way that you give love pretty much matches up with the way you receive it?
You know, I very much give love through my main 3 words of affirmation: physical touch, quality time. But I love giving gifts.
Yeah.
I've always been that way because whenever I'm out and I see something that reminds me of my partner or anybody really, I just want to get it to them because I love seeing the reaction on their face, and I love seeing people get excited about the things that I find for them. So receiving gifts is definitely up there. Acts of service is probably at the end, but I do know my current partner, Steven, does really receive and give acts of service really well. That's one that I've really had to kind of lean into because it isn't my go-to, but I know it makes a big difference. So
yeah, so I think we have seen from that you know, your love languages can shift, and they can kind of, you know, as you move through life, as you kind of move through one partner to the next, you might see that they change and shift as you grow and learn new things about yourself. So that's not uncommon to like feel a shift when you're with somebody new. But also, I think it's important to note, based on that your top love languages for the ways that you receive love can be different from the way that you give love. So like Jess's top way she receives love is going to be words of affirmation, but the top way that she gives it is going to be receiving gifts. And that's totally normal and pretty common for them to be different. Like she said, Steven's is more acts of service than anything else. You and your partner can totally have different love languages that are predominant, and that's never going to be an indicator of the success of the relationship. What's important is not to have the same love language, but to learn each other and learn how your partner best receives love and how they give love, and kind of to learn how to speak each other's love language so you can understand each other and love each other better. So that's important to note too. For me, mine was actually different. I thought that the way that I received love best was quality time, but because I haven't taken this quiz in a long time, things have changed. And now I see this and that totally makes sense to me. My number 1 is actually physical touch for receiving love, closely followed by words of affirmation, which I feel like has moved up in the ranks for me a little bit as far as receiving love is concerned. I think I've gotten better about receiving words of affirmation, and then those were followed by quality time, then acts of service, and receiving gifts was actually 0% for me on the receiving end, just because to me, I love when someone gives me a gift that is like so me, that they saw it and they immediately thought of me, or there was something about it that they were like, oh, that's so Kristen. But to me, it's more about like the person who knew me well enough to think of that than like the actual material thing itself, if that makes sense. So while I love things like that, I don't necessarily like look forward to receiving gifts. My top for receiving are physical touch and words of affirmation. And actually the top way that I give love is words of affirmation. I love to find, like we were saying, those quirky, unique things about people and call them out of them. I like to find really intentional, specific ways to affirm people. And I love watching the effect that it has. So it's kind of a way that I then receive love as well, I guess. We wanted to just kind of round out the episode by giving you some ways that you can use them to strengthen your communication in your relationships, your intentionality, and just the whole relationship overall.
I send it to my partner and ask them to take the quiz so I can kind of see what their love language is. And then we can use it in our conversations, in our communication checkpoints to say, hey, I feel like I need a little bit more physical touch. Like maybe when you walk by me in the kitchen, can you just put your hand on my shoulder so I know you're there, because that would make me feel more loved. It just opens up the floor to a different style of communication because you have this guideline of these 5 different languages or pillars.
Yeah.
So you can guide the conversation about your needs through them.
Yeah.
And it's a lot less scary than being like, I really am feeling like I'm missing something, but I don't really know why or how or where.
Yeah.
It just categorizes and organizes it really well for you.
Yeah. And once, you realize what your predominant ways of receiving and giving love are, as well as your partners, you can choose to focus on those. Most relationships will have some semblance of all 5. But if neither of you are really into the gifts thing, but you are both really, both scored really high with quality time, then maybe instead of Christmas gifts, you get each other, you collaborate and book a trip somewhere together, or you get someone an experience to go do something in the pre and hopefully post-COVID days. Like, my sister and I are very like that, so we would get each other like concert tickets for gifts.
Yeah, or like a cooking class could be really fun.
Something fun you can do together to create a memory and spend that quality time together, because the material thing isn't really of that much importance to either of you. So once you learn how to speak each other's language, and once you learn where the priorities lie for each of you, you can kind of cultivate everything around that. You can cultivate how you speak to your partner, how you do gifts with your partner, how you carve out that quality time and schedule it, and how you approach like the concept of intimacy with your partner, all those different things. So I think, like Jess said, these are some really strong pillars to kind of lean on, especially, in a new relationship that you feel like, oh, this is really going somewhere. Like, you feel so good about it, and you don't want to mess it up. So this is a really great tool to use to cultivate really good communication and strengthen your relationship. And we thought it would be such a great topic to implement into our month-long talk of love and relationship.
It's always really fun to look at dating and relationships from more of a psychological point of view, or from people who have done studies on it, because you just learn so much more about how to date. This was one of the first books that I read that helped me tune into, what being in an actual relationship and partnership would be like. And it's just such a great guideline. And even if you're not in a relationship right now, it is such a great thing to think about, so you can make sure that you're filling up your own cup and you are surrounding yourself with people who are filling up your cup as well.
And that you're communicating openly about how best your cup can be filled and how you can best do the same for the people that you love.
Yes.
So we hope that this was helpful to you and inspired some really intentional thought, or maybe a conversation between you and your partner. And we hope you'll stay tuned for next week, because if you are sick and tired of all this partnership talk and you are in a season of singleness, hi, I'm right there with you. We are going to talk all things singleness and growth in a season of singleness. So we hope you'll stay around for that episode next week. And if you are in a relationship, we hope you'll listen to...
being single is just as great of a learning opportunity as being in a relationship.
Yeah. So
it'll be a great episode.
These lessons and perspectives will be beneficial for everyone. So we hope you'll stick around for that. We will talk to you next Tuesday.
Thanks for listening. Bye. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Rediscover.
Please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening. Your reviews are what keep us going, and we'd love to hear from you.
Join us every Tuesday for a new conversation, and let us know what you think we should talk about next.
Follow us on Instagram at positively.kristen and at jessicafay508. And check out Jess's blog at theroadjesstraveled with 1l.com.
Until next time,
stay frumpy!